Okay, so with that, I think we're just going to jump right into our next panel, which is the future of assessments in the Yukon. So if I can ask the panelists to come up. We've got, take a chair. Yeah, I'm going to stand. Okay. I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'll stand. Yeah. Yeah. See? Okay, I think everybody's kind of got themselves a seat or so. Yeah, so as I said, we're talking about the future of assessments in the Yukon, and the discussion today is actually going to focus at the designated office level for YESA. So with that, I think I'll just start. I'm going to ask by starting each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their roles, if they would.
Hi, everyone. Hello. There we go. Hi, I'm Ken Bretzloff. I'm the Executive Director at the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board.
That's a very brief introduction.
I can give more. I was in the seat a year ago. At that point, I don't think anyone really knew who I was. It's been a very exciting year, so I'm excited to kind of share what has been happening. But a bit about me, I started my career surface water engineer in the diamond mines over in NWT, moved over here, got a job at Department of Environment, where I was the regulator for contaminated sites. Missed water, so I went back to the water board, as technical advisor. Was hired on at YESUB in 2022 as a panel hearing manager to spear up the casino file. And then, now I'm ED, which was never the plan, but I'm happy to be here. So,
Much better, don't you guys think?
Yes.
I'm Pamela O'Hara, sitting here today as a director at the Yukon Chamber of Mines. I'm also an environmental and community affairs consultant, and I've been working in the Yukon since 2005. Had the pleasure to work on Wolverine during the construction early operation days before things went sideways, I might add, after your presentation, Sue. And most recently was VP of sustainability at Fireweed. So I've had a lot of Yukon exposure, especially at the DOVA level. So I'm happy to participate today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Lovelace. I'm Vice President of the Klondike Plaster Miners Association and also work with Favron Enterprises, a mid-sized plaster operation in Dawson City. My background is I grew up in Dawson City, my family a placer mine, and I'm a fourth generation placer miner myself. My mom was originally from Selkirk First Nation, and so I have a tie to the local economy going back a long time, obviously. And I'm happy to be here today to talk to all of you about some of the issues we have or things we're working through.
Great, thanks for those introductions. So I think we're going to start today by Kent wanted to ask you about designated offices. And we've heard that obviously lots of applications in. And so that not necessarily meeting the timelines and understanding there's quite a backlog. So if you're comfortable commenting on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll start with, there's been defining moments in everything. Obviously for mining the territory moving forward, June 24th was one. If you're gonna look at YESUB and look inwards, I think there's two major ones in my mind. There's many more, but one was the signing UFA. One was when doors opened at YESUB offices in 2005. That's 20 years ago since we opened our doors. And in that time, and since signing UFA, there's been rapid progression in case law, science, engineering, society, Yukon as a whole. We are in a very different spot now than we were 20 years ago. I think that came to a head. It was building for years, but it came to a head earlier in the summer when we were not able to meet our timelines. We had a huge turnover in staff, I think around 47% the year before. We have 7 offices, 6 regional. Some offices were down to 1 staff member in key areas like in the Mayo District and in Dawson at times. So 2 things you can do. You can just keep bluffing your way through it, or you can really get out there and just explain to everyone transparently, like, this is the situation that we're facing. We need to look inwards, we need to help ourselves to help everyone else in the territory. So that's what we did. We posted on the YESF online registry, so that's the transparency piece of our online aspect of our business, that basically we're unable to meet timelines. And because of that, you can expect delays in all levels, in all of the process. We are speaking about the designated office process. We have 2 other tiers of assessment, an executive committee and the panel, fully staffed. We're working through that, like, no problem. So yeah, that happened, and that's on me. I went to the board, I asked to do it, so if you have any questions, please contact me directly. I'm happy to pick up the phone. So why we did that was kind of threefold. We needed to be able to tell everyone what was going on so people could expect something from our process, even if it wasn't what they originally had expected. Staff had to be supported by senior management, by the board. This is a way of doing that. The third part is it was to indicate that we needed help. And that is kind of, and I'll speak to that later, more what that help looks like in the past year. But yeah, part of that is then we realized that we need to take a different approach of how we do things, I guess. And that was kind of developing a queue for projects, first in, first out. YESF has a very broad mandate. We have everything from major mines right through to laneway extension, telephone poles, major dams, all at the same time. So procedural fairness dictates what we do, first in, first out, meaning if whoever had availability to write an assessment was assigned the latest in the queue, or the furthest down the queue, and work through that. And that's kind of what we've taken us to today in the reality. So we still have a backlog. We are processing projects almost at a 1-to-1 basis now, so that's a good sign. But it doesn't help that we're in a spot that we're still trying to dig out of. So that's kind of been the year.
Okay. So with the changes that you've implemented, I don't know, so it sounds like you've gone and said, okay, this would, especially to your board, we need to set new things in place. So I don't know, Pam or Neil, if you want to just maybe talk about your experiences of YESF or how that's impacted, projects you've been on, or potential these changes, what that might mean as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the plaster mining community, obviously we have quite a bit of opportunity to work with YESA as plaster operators go through the YESA process. Currently, in the next 3 years, there's going to be 200 plus assessments that need to go through YESA. And in order to do that, we need to know that the transparency is there and the communication is there, and that's helping operators understand and have confidence in what's going to occur and that they're going to get through the process. Obviously, it's going to be a very busy time due to the fact it's the 20-year reunion of YESA coming through, so that is why we have this backlog of operations coming through currently. And then we also look forward to, hopefully, I know there's a lot of turnover within YESA recently as well, and so having more assessors and working together with operators. We're hoping to be able to start to teach the assessors more, or work with the assessors and teaching them more about our industry. The plaster industry is very different, again, from exploration or hard rock. We're small family-based operators that are working anywhere from 1 to 40-man crews, and we all still work together as a group and are in the same sort of procedure. And so trying to sum all that up together and bring everyone together and have a very clear understanding to work with YESA is going to be something we're working towards doing in the future. Yeah, that's all I have at this moment.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add that, I think there's backlog today, but you're going to get additional backlog because there's so many proponents in this room, and I'm aware that there's a bit of a panic that they have to get into the queue. So unfortunately, when you're in a rush and you're just trying to get next in line, you are going to put an application in that's maybe not your best work. just to get into that queue. So, you know, that then puts more onus on your assessors. It probably will result in more information requests. So we're not helping ourselves by, you know, having a one in, one out process. And I guess what is the strategy? May I ask a question, Sue?
Sorry?
May I ask a question?
Yep, go.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So
no,
what
yeah,
is the
go for it.
strategy in the interim? Because you know this flood of applications is coming. I've just heard 200. I'm aware of others in the hard rock sector. Mineral literacy, you've done a lot on that this year that I'm aware of. So maybe you could enlighten this audience.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll jump to what we have been doing for the year, because we haven't just been sitting here. Surprise, surprise. That was honestly. So yeah, I went to the board. The board wants YESIP to work more than anyone as well, which is great to have leadership like that. It's a tripartite board, multiple views, and I basically asked them, do you want to continue or apply Band-Aids, or do you want to try something different? And the board went with the latter, recognizing where we were. So what does that look like? And that kind of speaks to your question. We've been given the resources, because people want YESIP to work, to do some pretty big things. One is a reorganization of YESIP itself. So we are a decentralized model. We have assessment offices in 6 communities and head office here in Whitehorse. That's written legislation. That's the beauty of YESIP. That's co-management. That's why people around the world look to Yukon for examples. We're not trying to change that at all. We're just trying to allow people to actually do their job descriptions. And that's a huge problem right now, because everyone in the organization, if they have a pen, they're writing an assessment. So you don't have those supports around the organization to make efficiencies for like what's coming in the door, the expectation, guidance, templates, all those things are important to keep people able to do their job and not burnt out, which we were facing. So the reorg started a while ago. We have some key roles already hired. More will be posted next week. We're planning to have that done by February. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. That's a lot of change for an organization, but people are willing to change, which is also exciting, recognizing we have to try something. Second part to that is the designated office rules review. So the rules were drafted. They have been reviewed periodically, but it's time to look at them more comprehensively in the current realities. So that is early stages on that one. That's going to take time. We need to engage. We will engage. We want to engage. We need to use 20 years of our own experience to figure out what we need to present to get the conversation going. That's what we're working on now. And early in the new year, you'll hear more on that. So those are the 2 things that they're big things. They take time. I can't tell you the timelines are going to be fixed tomorrow, unfortunately. I know everyone in this room wants me to. But it is going to take time, and that's what we're doing to try and reset the stage for the future so it works for everyone. Along the lines there, we have people helping behind the scenes. Anyone that wants to help behind the scenes can. That sounds like I'm asking people to write assessments for us, but there's definitely lines there. But yeah, we're adding resources where we can. We're processing projects. Another big thing is communication. It's been a theme this afternoon for sure. I spent a lot of time on the radio, in print, talking to anyone that will talk to me. I definitely know people think that's probably weird, because like, why are you bringing people into the process if you can't even meet your timelines? But again, we need to start somewhere. We need to break down that black box that is YESIP, build those relationships so we can learn together what makes a good proposal, what actually works through the process, where are our lines, where are the sandboxes that we play in, how do we work together? Like YESIP's one thing, but it's also EMR, it's also the Water Board, there's Heritage, the other UFA board and committees. It's a whole puzzle here in Yukon that we're trying to work on. So that's why you've been hearing more of me. Yeah.
So would either of you like to comment on what you heard there and optimism?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's great hearing again that they're working on new ways and new abilities to get through the assessment process, finding ways to answer the backlog that's there. For placer miners, because we have so many lined up to go through the queue, miners are hoping to get fair and honest assessments, and having that opportunity to go through the assessment process is important so that we know what the factors are that the communities are looking for, because that's what at the root of what YESIP was. That was the plan originally. And so trying to get back to that is what I think is really important. And again, one thing that was mentioned is finding templates and finding ways to encourage operators to do very clear and concise proposals will help, because it gives a certainty when you get to the assessment phase that you're not getting an IR that comes from nowhere or having a confusion, right? And so trying to alleviate some of those issues is what hopefully we'll continue to work towards. And I think that's great when we can have the communication in order to try to achieve these goals working forward. Another thing I would say is also, like with placer miners, most of them are probably come from fairly high levels of education. Placer miners are often people who their education is on the ground, in the dirt, working on equipment, that sort of thing. So when it comes to going through this process, it's not something that they're used to doing on a day-to-day basis. And it's something that can be quite daunting, obviously, as it is for most, but especially for a placer operator. And so I think keeping that in mind and helping us educate our own organization and our own miners will help a bunch as well. Going forward, trying to keep that, again, comes back to confidence as well, making sure that they understand what they have to do or what the process is going to look like, and being able to achieve ultimately an assessment and eventually a license. So.
Pam?
Yeah, and fully understand that this can't change overnight. And just building on what you've said, Neil, it's that certainty of, are you going to be able to work the next open field season, right? And planning is extensive on the hard rock side, securing drills, doing your project plans, learning from your drill results the year before. The concern I have with, ongoing backlog is just, again, that retention of assessors so that you learn from one project to the next. And you brought up the DO rules. So I have another question on DO rules. There is the ability to establish a working group. And, the purpose of assessment is to make projects better. It's not to solve all the world's problems. It's to distinguish and differentiate projects based on unique effects that could present an issue or an effect to people and the land. Is there a way to maybe have a working group where you work through some of the more common effects so that projects are then assessed on those unique or most impactful effects? Because that's really what this needs to come down to, is that we are mitigating, we are solving the problems for the most impactful effects.
So like standard terms and conditions?
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to say it that way. Standard terms and conditions, but also an understanding that, under YESA, you're assessing only the adverse effects. We've talked a lot in the last couple of days. There's been many presentations that talk about the socioeconomic effects of mining in this territory. That cannot be taken into consideration, right? So we do need standard terms of conditions. I understand EMR is about to, I'm not looking at you, Lauren, about to release, some guidance on socioeconomic performance. And Sue, you mentioned that on Minto too. So, I think there's a recognition that it's a more fulsome world. It's not just the natural environment we're worried about. We have to take into consideration that human environment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a YESA review forthcoming. We can't wait for that. What we can do, the legislation currently allows us to develop DO rules or review them. So what that looks like is that's a question mark to come. Everything's on the table in the respect to what the scope is. And we're trying to spend the time now with our experience to figure out what from the inside makes sense and what we think works the best so we can present that outwards and have that conversation with First Nations, with Yukon government, with industry, with Canada. It's a big conversation that is needed because, there's a lot of aspects to our mandate. 20 years has figured out pretty well how to measure a drop of water. The other half of our title and our name is very complicated and something that never should have been ignored and definitely won't be ignored moving forward.
So I think just following on that line, so industry's also had 20 years experience with the process. And so I guess, and maybe just we can comment on it together, or the ability to work on those process efficiencies together. Like you've talked about what you're trying to do. I know from an industry standpoint, it'd be like, as you said, is it a working group? Is it whatever? Yeah, just suggestions, because obviously if there's anything we can contribute from the industry perspective that might influence or, again, just trying to not make it simpler, but just easier to assessment, I guess, to get to that. Like you say, you were talking about templates. So I don't know if you guys want to comment on any of that. I guess I just would like to say again, this whole conference has been a conversation about communication. And I think there's definitely willingness, I know from the plaster industry, I'd say from courts industry, to be part of that and sit down with YESA wherever we can have those conversations that might help give perspectives from our side as well to go, oh, okay, well then maybe we can go down this path. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
I'll quickly comment. As we are probably the largest group of operators that go through the ESSA process, I think it would be good for us to have the opportunity to work with our own group and try to find ways to help make them more efficient going through the ESSA process. Obviously, we need to know and have the ability to have the speak with you guys first and find what it is that you're looking for. But I think that's one way that we can start to try to help the permit or the assessment process go quicker, is making sure we have standard items that miners are providing or that their consultants are providing, because it would be important to be able to try to avoid additional information requests, or another option too would be even talking to our membership as well and letting them know that full and honest answers to information requests will help with not getting an additional information request. Because that's obviously something that we often get is operators, again, we don't have big teams, to make these, to fill out the assessment, but it's typically a one-man show or a family that is submitting, and so their responses might not always be the fullest or what the assessors are looking for, and so finding ways to try to communicate those things in order to help would be something that the KPMA would like to be a part of, and helping work towards those things in order to help with the assessment process or on your guys' end.
Yeah, the cool thing, like, obviously our timelines have wreaked havoc for many, many people. And that is fairly why wouldn't you be angry at us, and why would you want to help us try and fix this? But that's quite the opposite. People do want to help, and that's exactly what we need, because we can't do this by ourselves. Part of that reorganization is allow key members of our organization to actually be able to be in the community more, be in their districts more, foster those relationships, pick up that information that we need in our process from the regions to funnel it through. And that, I think, can be transposed from a project to a gathering, or right through to something like a comprehensive rules review, or whatever that ends up looking like. So yeah, we will be in touch in the new year for that one.
Yeah. As I say, don't really have a lot more. I don't know if anybody else wants to add comments or take a question from the floor.
Ooh, I love questions.
Sorry?
I love questions.
Questions? Anybody have a question? Oh,
Maybe I do, Sue.
okay, go for it.
With so many new staff, how are you embarking upon, again, increasing mineral literacy? I mean, that's what I call it, but do I know anything about placer mining?
Yeah.
Not really. So if I were coming in as a new assessor, you can't understand the effects without understanding the activities. And to know the magnitude, the duration, the reverse, everything that has to be considered in environmental assessment, you really have to have practical experience. And I'm sure that that's something that you've thought deeply about.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think assessor is a technical generalist, I would call that skill set. Everyone has their niche that they've learned, that they have passion about, that they've worked in before, but then they're thrown into this wider conversation where they need to know a lot more. So any opportunity like KPMA tour, visiting exploration sites, we definitely do that. Inviting people to do lunch and learns, come into the organization to give talk on whatever topic might be. Usually I pitch it when you read an evaluation report, what annoys you and what do you think we should know? And come and respectfully tell us about that, and let's have a dialogue. So like that opportunity, again, with the reorg, when I first started, I was given the direction to make sure panel, EC, and the DO process were all talking to each other. Timely and effective process. That's written right into our like mandate and legislation. What is the core of that? It's knowledge, communication, training, basically. So the model that we're moving towards is hoping to enhance that ability for all three levels to talk to each other. So we know that at the panel review, we're going this way, and to the same degree, we're going the same way in EC or DO project, no matter the scale. Also, consistent training through the organization. It's needed, is required. It's not that we're not training, we've been training forever. But there's always new ways to try, and we're gonna try.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to just it's encouraging to hear that you're working on training throughout, as it is important, obviously, to have the assessors that will be assessing files somewhere else in the Yukon other than where the main level of activity is occurring. As right now, 91% of operating placer mines are working in central Yukon, mainly out of the communities in Dawson and Mayo. And so it's important to be able to understand what's happening there if you're in a different jurisdiction working on trying to understand the operations at hand, or since they aren't in your backyard. So it's good and encouraging to hear that ongoing training and ongoing education for assessors will hopefully help lead to a better understanding of what they're assessing, even if it's not next door.
I think one note on that, so like there's a position called manager at a designated office. There's 6 of them across the territory. They're actually delegated authority from the board to sign off on evaluation reports in the DO process. That position will remain in the districts. And like I was speaking to earlier, the hope is that there's more ability for them to be still writing assessments, still like doing that work, but also feeding in more into the strategic realm of YESAB to like have that feedback loop into a centralized training model. So in theory, you might have an office of 2 or 3 staff that really know the district. Now you might have a whole organization that knows that district quite well as well. That's the reality that we've been working in this summer. I think it's been the reality for a couple of years. So it's more just calling what it is.
Yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that, how do you ensure consistency then across the different designated offices or districts?
That's those new key roles. So all those consistency tasks. So auditing what's coming out the door, training, let's call it those. Those were always side of desk just because of the staff that we had. So we're taking those tasks out, assigning them to key positions so that can then also funnel into the strategic realm of YESAB to feed into through the training. Yeah. It might sound like we're just creating more government, but I swear we're trying not to. We're trying to go the other way.
I think we had talked in some of our lead up to this panel, just as you say, you obviously get lots of projects that are in the same area, right? Or like plaster miners, mainly in those 2 areas, right? So, and I think you had mentioned too, just looking at those, okay, it's going to be some of the same things happening, or okay, this is the impacts that might be there or how to manage them. So I think that looking at that as well. And I know the chamber had definitely offered to help with some education, lunch and learns, and I know some companies have as well. So just want to say that offer is there again. Whatever we can do to help with that mineral literacy, I like that word. The chamber's more than happy. We have lots of members that would be interested in helping anyway. Yeah. So any last comments from anybody? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, couldn't wait. Try not to. Given that you guys are working like interjurisdictionally now, so water board, EMR, YESAB, great, long overdue, wonderful. Have you contemplated, so we've done recently a couple of trial, a mock, for example. So in your training, it might be beneficial to do a mock plaster application with some plaster folks, some of your team, some of the EMR team, some of the water board team, and then really everybody can get and bring in the local First Nation from whichever region you're working with, and get a little bit of the perspective of everybody's position in one room, so we don't appear on paper to be at odds with each other. But I think it's
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think the first step, if I can speak on behalf of the three organizations, is figuring out like ourselves, our staff, where the lines are between our organizations. Like, where is YESIB going too far? Where are they not going far enough? Where are the gaps? That's part of it. But the other part is, like you said, we don't really know each other. We know each other, but do we know each other? Yeah. So I think once you actually get to know a face or two on the other side, that's the biggest help. And I think that extends to First Nation governments, to industry. That's key. So I think first we need to do that internally, set that course, and then the next logical step to me would be what probably you're suggesting.
Just
Well-
further to that, yesterday, the Premier mentioned, and you're talking about working with the other entities, and, it's not just assessment. Of course, assessment leads to the decision bodies who are then issuing the approvals, and the permitting process goes hand in hand with assessment. Obviously, there's a linear approach there. He mentioned a report by Steve Morrison, and is that something that will be public, or is that internal in terms of understanding those roles and expectations, or how the future may change for proponents as they enter into the YESA process and then into licensing?
I can actually answer that question. So that was YG initiative, and that's with the ECO right now. What is happening on the ground between the organizations, I think, is flowing out of there. Is it directly related? Potentially, potentially not, but it's happening regardless. And sometimes if you don't put a shiny name on something, it helps.
Great. Well, I think we're at the end of the session, so just a round of applause for our panelists.